So, welcome to this talk. My name is Alexander Bell, and this talk is entitled, God Will Transform You If You Ask Him to. So if you say to God, God, I don't want my selfish ego anymore. I want to be a vessel of your pure love instead. Then do you know what will happen? The personality of Christ will slowly but surely begin to replace the personality of your ego. Ego thoughts will be replaced by more selfless and compassionate thoughts, and you will experience yourself more as God's child, with God's mind, which is Christ's mind. So essentially the false you will be replaced by the real you. You will stop thinking of yourself as separate from God. Your sense of identity will be tied to Christ, because Christ has occupied your heart and your mind. Will this make you Christ-like? In a sense, yes, as your entire being will be infused and permeated by his radiant light. It will obviously not make you Jesus himself, but it will make you an embodiment of Jesus' love, which is actually what your heart was designed for, irrespective of whether you are male or female, or whether you believe in Christ or not. So which would you rather have? Your ego and all of its conflicting and complicated thoughts, or the mind of Christ filled with his beautiful radiant light? Because you have the choice, just like I had. Long ago I chose the mind of Christ, and I have been patiently unpicking the tendrils of the ego from my being since then. Eventually, you will come to the final tendrils, the more deeply conditioned ego desires for something other than God's will. Our total and complete surrender to God's will means the end of the ego, which means the end of fear also. The ego has nothing left to cling on to you with, because it only holds on to you with the desires that it can place in your heart. These are like its roots, which give the ego a foothold in your being. It makes you desire things other than union with God, and thus union with God does not occur, and you remain tied to the ego. Eliminating ego desires is how you loosen its roots, and when they are gone, and simply doing God's will is your only desire, the shadow of the ego simply falls away from you, and you join with God. What remains in you is the light of Christ. I only know this because I've undergone this process, and I'm not telling you this in order to feed my ego, because that is the last thing I want to do, but rather to inform you that you can do the same. In fact, anybody can do the same. And there is no downside, no drawback, no sacrifice needed, except the ego. And trust me, if there is anything that needs to be sacrificed in this world, it is the ego. Lay it on God's altar and ask him to terminate it, because he most certainly will, and you will never, ever regret saying goodbye to it. It could not be simpler, but it does require your heartfelt determination that this is what you want. If there is any doubt, you will not be able to lay your ego on the altar, because the doubt comes from the ego itself. It is its way of holding on to you and keeping itself alive. The ego is a parasite, and the sooner you are free from its controlling grip, the happier, more inspired, and more fulfilled you will be, guaranteed. Now, of course, the ego will give you plenty of thoughts about what I have just said, and you can get involved in them if you want to, but that will only keep you tangled up in its conceptual world. However, if you pay attention to your heart, you will notice it resonating with the truth of my words, and it will encourage you to act upon them. All you need to do is turn your attention away from your own reflective and analytical thinking and speak to God as if he is right next to you, listening to every word, because in truth, he is. Tell him that you want him to perform ego surgery on you and to free you from its poisonous and controlling grip. He will do this if it is genuinely what you want in your heart. But please be fully aware that this means following his plan for your life rather than your own. Naturally, he will use all the gifts, skills, and passions he has blessed you with in order to make a difference to other people's lives, and in ways you could never have imagined. Following God's plan is by far the greatest adventure you can possibly have in life, and there is nothing stopping you embarking on that adventure, except a few doubts and fears perhaps. But remember, they belong to the ego, and if you lay it on God's altar, they will hinder you no more. It is time to take our attention away from our self-obsession and turn it towards God. We do this simply by talking to Him, thanking Him, asking Him to purify our heart and make us a more loving person. These are among the most powerful prayers you can utter. When God hears your genuine desire to be a more loving and pure-hearted person, He acts instantly and powerfully in ways we cannot comprehend. As our heart is purified, which essentially means that our desires are purified and they become less selfish, then we move more into the light, closer to God, more into the divine realm of awareness. Our heart becomes more full of love, more joyful, more free, and more compassionate. We begin to understand that the true mystery of life revolves around the purity of our heart and the desires which we allow to take root there. The ego is constantly persuading us to want things that lead us towards temporary material satisfaction, rather than sustained spiritual fulfillment. In the process, our heart grows cold from a lack of spiritual connection, and we forget how vital it is to nurture this connection. We become addicted to worldly pleasures, distractions, and experiences, forgetting the incomparable beauty of joy and the love in our heart when we are close to God. And so to conclude, we simply need to turn our mind away from the worldly and towards the spiritual beauty of God. Ask Him to purify your heart. Ask Him to make you a more loving, tolerant, and forgiving person. Ask Him to give you greater humility, and you will discover that life changes very rapidly as your heart changes. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. So thank you for listening to this talk. You can listen to more talks, you can download my free book, and you can download all of my music, all from my website, which is alexanderbell.org. And you'll find lots of other interesting things there. So thank you for listening to this talk. I wish you well, and God bless you.